Welcome to Invited Back Podcast with Sabbath Kapah. Last week, I talked about an interview that I got to do with suicide and violence prevention expert Latasha Davidson. Today, I'm very excited to share with you some actual clips from the conversation. You'll hear words of encouragement, practical steps, and things that we can do to stay on purpose within our own homes and communities. I know that you will be encouraged. Thank you so much for joining me in this space. I hope that you guys have a great week and are not afraid to ask the hard questions and dig deep into spaces of community that aren't always comfortable, but so necessary if we want to do life with people in a real way. Until next time, aloha.
Yeah,
that's so good.
yeah, doing what he needed to do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we wanted to also jump in, like as we dig into the topics of suicide and violence prevention. We're talking about gratitude. How do we cultivate that when things are really dark in our, like there's just no light. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? What does it look like? I mean, is it possible? Is it possible, or maybe it's not? Maybe there's something else to focus on in that space.
Yeah. I think you hit it at the top of our discussion when you talk about intentionality and we have to be very self-aware. If we find ourselves in a posture where we are in that dark place or in that place of feeling like we can't pull ourselves up, we do have to have the strength and the courage to reach out for support, to reach out for help. We were not created to be alone. We were created to live and thrive in community and relationship with other people. And so that's one of the things that I really focus on when we're working with individuals, trying to help them move out of suicidal ideation, is focusing on community. We also focus on community at large, reaching out, checking on one another, making sure that people are engaged. So if someone finds themselves in that posture where they feel like they just can't pull themselves up, we are hoping that they will find the strength and the courage to reach out to that one person that they have a connection with, that one person that they have a relationship with, that can help support them in that time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, you never really know if you're that one, right? So
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we talk about. If you're that one for somebody else, and that's why it's so important that we have conversation. That's why it's important that we connect and we talk. I like to say a lot of times we're all on this spectrum. And I do my hands, go like this way, do my hands like this. We're on this spectrum. And we all have these significant life events. We have things that go on. So, for example, one of the highest reasons, risk factors, I guess I should say, with suicide is relationship issues. Folks go through a bad breakup, they go through a divorce, and now they no longer want to live because they don't have that person in their life. So we're on this spectrum. And so how do you know if someone's on this side where they break up and they say, I'm good. There's other fish in the sea. I'm all right. I can handle it. I'm good. Or if they're on this side of the spectrum without that other person in their life. So that's, we don't know. So we have to have conversations. We have to talk to individuals to be able to recognize, and this might be getting into some of our other talking points, but to recognize signs, recognize differences in behavior, recognize one of the top ones, differences in substance use. Maybe they're drinking a little bit more heavily, not just a glass of wine at dinner or something like that. It's turned into a little bit more of a habitual pattern. So we have to talk to each other and know those that we are in community with and in association with.
That's really good. Yeah, that was one of the questions that we had is like, what are the unseen common signs to look for when we begin to be concerned for a loved one that is struggling with the suicidal thoughts. So you said, substance abuse. Is there any other things that we can be looking for, like if we're concerned about somebody in our community, or
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about right now is empowering family members and empowering those that are in fellowship and relationship with other people, because the people that we are in relationship with are the first ones to usually recognize any signs of distress, any signs that something is not quite right. So again, if we have that relationship, we can see like a small behavior change that may not be recognized by somebody on the outside. But if we're close to this person, it's something we can recognize. Maybe they're a little bit more agitated, and it's not just a brief moment of stress, it's something that's continual. Maybe they are a little bit more depressed and sad, and it's hard to get them out of the house or engage in activities and things that they used to like. So those are kind of the unseen things. It's not these blaring with the red lights booming that, hey, I'm having trouble. It's just these small, subtle things. And one of the things with suicide that we have to remember too is there is still this factor of impulsivity. A lot of suicides occur with impulsive behavior. That one of the campaigns that I work with is a campaign that looks at firearms and medications and how those are stored in the home, and making sure that we try to store those things if we can, especially with firearms, in a locked safe, in a locked box outside of the home. Because research does show if we can give like a 5-minute breather from the time a person has an ideation of dying by suicide until they actually make an attempt, then we can save a life. Because most times, if a person can't get to that first option, if it were a firearm, they're not going to just shift and, okay, well, now I'm going to go do something else. So if we can bring that buffer, it does make a huge, huge difference. So, I know that kind of went off a little bit from subtle signs.
We need to talk
I'm very passionate about empowering loved ones and folks close to individuals to recognize signs.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because we need to hear it. That's powerful. 5 minutes, a 5-minute buffer.
Yeah, absolutely. Can save a life. Yeah. 60 to 70% of suicides are with firearms. So that is one of the very high risk categories, are folks that have that access to firearms. Yeah.
Is there questions that we can ask, or like, how do we start a conversation about being concerned about somebody who is moving towards suicide or is struggling with violence in their home?
Yeah, we have to ask the question directly. And I know that sounds like just a quick little answer, but when it comes to suicide, when it comes to folks being affected by child maltreatment or domestic violence or any of those forms of interpersonal violence, we have to ask the question directly. So specifically with suicide, we can ease into it, but we have to make sure that by the end of that conversation, that person understands exactly what we're asking them. An example might be if a person were having, if they were withdrawn and they were pulling away from family, pulling away from friends, not engaging in activities. That could be the segue to the conversation, is that I've noticed that, you haven't been coming out to play soccer. I've noticed you haven't, wanted to come out and be with our social group, or you haven't joined in this environment, you haven't joined any of our virtual platforms that I know that we've been trying to meet read up on, and I'm concerned about you. And talk through that conversation, but then just asking the question directly: are you contemplating suicide? Are you contemplating harming yourself or dying by suicide? And asking it directly. It has to be a very direct question, because folks that are having suicidal ideation are sometimes not as honest and open. Of course, they know how to mask it. So sometimes if we ask the question, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? They could go into this posture of, no, I'm not going to hurt myself. It's not going to hurt. I'm not going to hurt myself. So we have to be direct in that question when we ask them, are you contemplating suicide? Have you had thoughts of suicide? And we have to be ready for their response, ready to to receive that response when they tell us that maybe they have had suicidal ideation. And so just for an example, if someone did say, you know what, I have thought about it. I have just thought, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. I have had these thoughts. If that person has had those kind of thoughts, then that next question would be, do you have a plan? Because we want to see at that point, are they having thoughts, which a high percentage of folks do. A very high percentage of individuals have those fleeting thoughts. But have they moved over into the realm of having a plan? So if they, oh no, I haven't had a plan. I just thought, I just wanted to sleep and not wake up. But if they say, yeah, I've thought about, I'm going to take every bottle of, every pill in the medicine cabinet, then now we know we need to get them some support and some help, and we need to stay with them through that. Yeah. I know it's a difficult discussion, but necessary.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for, even just, having the courage to say, ask the question directly. And it's something, that's so real. And if we don't have a plan on how to walk alongside the people in our communities, then, it's not going to be helpful. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Asking that question, being ready for the answer. I like to tell folks, just practice it. Practice it in the mirror. Practice asking the question in the mirror. What does that look like? What does it feel like to you to ask somebody, are you contemplating dying by suicide? Are you okay? What's going on with you? How can I support? Just being that person there for them. And again, being prepared for that answer and not leaving them alone. That's where the rubber meets the road. Is we could have these things going on in our community and folks around us. And so when we do engage, being willing to continue to stay engaged, not just dropping them off at the emergency department or whatever and they never see us again. We have to be willing to stay engaged.
And do you stay beyond what you're asked? So I've experienced suicide within some communities that I've been a part of and within my family. So it's interesting to just think about, how long do you stay, and what if they're pushing you away? At one point, do you figure out, is that maybe you're not strong enough to be that person? What happens next after that?
Right. And that's why we have community. That's why there's different ways that we can respond to somebody. Maybe it's not that you're strong enough or you feel competent enough to be there with that person. But if you know community resources, if you know other people that they may be a little bit more comfortable with, that's part of it, is having a community of support that you can reach out and ask for assistance. And if someone finds themselves in a situation where someone is saying, no, I'm not contemplating dying by suicide, I'm not, there are mechanisms in communities where we can have folks go by and do a wellness check, We can have our medical professionals go by and check and make sure that people are doing okay. So it's not necessarily that you have to overstay your welcome, which if we're going to talk to Miss Tasha, I say I'll overstay my welcome. I'm gonna sit right here on this couch. You can go do what you need to do, but I'm not leaving you right now. I'm just not. So, but if you find yourself in that type of a situation, it's called delegating that responsibility to somebody else. We can be very direct in our approach and ask the question and be that person to engage. But if we are not the person to stay there and be with them the whole time, we can delegate that responsibility to somebody else.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna switch a little bit towards the violence prevention side of it. Can you just define for us violence as it relates to the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. When I talk about violence, it's from an interpersonal and self-directed. So interpersonal violence is how we hurt each other. That's the stuff, we hear about: the domestic violence, the child maltreatment, bullying, stalking, all of that kind of behavior where one person is harming another. And then we have the self-directed violence, which is the suicide that we're talking about. And so just my baseline definition is where somebody uses their words, their actions, or their power to intentionally harm somebody else. Their words, their actions, or their power. Because it's not always that someone's putting their hands on somebody. It could be their words. It could be in the form of sexual harassment, where there's a look, there's a gesture, there's something that doesn't, their physical being isn't in proximity with that other person, but their words, their actions have definitely made an impact. So words, actions, or power, because a lot of times in work environments and in different communities, and dare I say in our churches sometimes, we have seen where folks use their power in a negative way to harm somebody else. So, yeah, words, power, action. Yeah.
So is it going back to, do we just ask directly if we're concerned about that?
Asking who, a perpetrator or?
I guess maybe somebody who we feel like is on the receiving end of that, somebody who is being impacted by somebody's words or actions or power in a negative way.
Yeah, absolutely. That you're going to always hear from me asking a question directly. What we see a lot of times, especially with sexual assault victims, they may have experienced a sexual assault. And so now, again, those same symptoms of withdrawing, not wanting to be close to people, being skittish, which makes it a little bit difficult in this virtual environment that we're functioning in right now, makes it a little bit difficult to observe those things. But I always tell people, depending on which audience I'm talking to, with this audience, I can say we have Holy Spirit and we know when something just doesn't feel right. In different areas, I might tell them, in your gut, when something just doesn't feel right. So always going with that and asking the question directly. If it's someone, and it doesn't have to be, especially in the domestic violence, sexual assault, child maltreatment, we don't know what's going on in families or, behind closed doors. We don't know what's happened, but it's never a problem to approach someone and just say, I'm concerned. I've noticed these particular things and it's different from what I know about you. So can we talk about that just a little bit? What's going on with you? And I'm giving them an opportunity to talk. So direct question. Yes, ma'am.
So good. I might be encouraged in my heart. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I have the courage to do that.
Amen. That's I want to encourage. I mean, it's as I mentioned, if you'd asked me 3 years ago if I would be, well, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, if this would be the realm that I would be working in, I would have never thought, suicide, violence? Oh no, oh no, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But it's amazing how the Lord not only will use personal experiences, but then He will equip you and empower you to encourage others and make a difference in the kingdom. And so I've often talked, y'all hear me talk about Mia, and I know she's your curator and you're the leader of this team, but she's had such a profound impact on my life as far as speaking in my life about purpose and what she sees, that God can do with me. And it's been amazing just to see this journey. So I'm thankful that you're encouraged, because that's what I want. I want us to be encouraged and know that even with these things going on in our community, all is not lost. God is still sovereign, and He can empower each and every one of us to make a difference in somebody else's life. Absolutely.
Amen. Absolutely. You know, that's a perfect, there's a question in here that Mia asked, and it was in the beginning of our talk, but I think it's a perfect way to kind of circle back and kind of round out the conversation. So her question was, what are some practical steps to take to get out of the way? That it's not about us. It's not about whether or not I have enough courage to ask a direct conversation, even in that situation. So how do we get out of the way to live into our purpose for what God has for us?
That's a good one. That's a good question. What I would say, I can talk about my lived experience as far as getting out of the way, is coming to the Lord in a posture of surrender. And that is not always easy to do. I know we can all probably attest to situations where, well, Lord, I'm gonna give it to you. I'm done with it. I'm not going back. But truly having a real sit down conversation with the Lord, that I surrender my will, the same as Jesus did, to your will, God. I'll never forget when I sat and I had that conversation with the Lord, and I just said, I'm here. You brought me here for a reason. Life has shifted and turned and curved in ways that I never would have thought were going to happen. But this is your life. You get the glory. You get the honor. So whatever it is that you want to do. So that first practical step, I think, is recognizing that we are here, recognizing that I do have a purpose. And if I don't know what that is, spending time with the Lord to where He will guide you into that purpose. And I'm truly a witness that will happen. So that's the number one practical thing. And then once you do start hearing, well, maybe I should go this way. Maybe this is something that I should do, or you're drawn or you're led to do something. Acting on that, moving, I'll never forget, it was when I was in Washington, actually. And I would always just feel this strong drawing just to go walk around the hospital there in Lacey and pray for people. Just walk around and pray. And I'll never forget the first time I did that. I felt so silly. I'm like, Lord, I don't know these people. Just walking around the hospital. Yeah, I pray for you. And just, walking around. But as I began to do that, it was all about posture of encouraging, showing love, letting folks know that even though whatever's going on, if you're sitting in this emergency room waiting to be seen, that God is here. And there were a couple of times even that I would walk around and I was like, Lord, nobody's here. No, I don't, nobody. And so I would just sit and just pray for people as they walked past. So that was the beginning of me having a heart of servitude, that God, just use me however you want to use me. So practical, taking the time to surrender, sit down, really, really hear from Him. And then when He does start to lead you, taking steps in that direction. And He'll let you know if that ain't what you're supposed to be doing. You'll know. But really, those are the two practical things that I can think
of. I love that, especially as we're moving into like a holiday season. Next week is Thanksgiving. So, kids are out of school. Well, they're not logging into their computers for school.
Yeah, yeah.
And and so it's a kind of hopefully a space where we can get face to face first with the Lord and say, like, you know what do you want me to do? And I know for me, especially in this season, I've written it down, like really practical personal mission statement that I read over every morning, and it just reminds me, like, this is it, and this is why. And then, as we move towards holidays and we're more intentional about the relationships that are closest to us, um, hopefully after this conversation and listening to this, we can have courage to ask hard questions and be very direct if we need to be, and know that it's not just about us, but it's about the community that we've been placed in. And yeah, and these issues are very real within every community. There's no community that this hasn't touched. So thank you so much for having this conversation and for giving us practical steps and for